Creating cosmos out of chaos.
Let's start. Where are you right now? We're really, we've read that you live on Salt Spring. So that's exciting to
Yeah.
us because we have a
Yeah.
deep passion for that island for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I moved here a few years ago. My husband and I moved onto 10 acres, and we're kind of tucked away in the forest, and it's heaven. I feel like I wake up every day and go outside, and I'm just in awe that I lived this life. It was like my entire life goal just to live in the forest. And I remember when we first moved here, and I would be walking through the woods in our backyard, and all of a sudden I'd have this moment where I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, this is the thing that I always wanted. Like, I used to tell Ben, if I were to die living in the city, it would be my deepest regret on my deathbed. So just to have this dream come true, that might not sound like much for some people, but for me, just living in the forest, I don't know how many goals left.
It's freedom.
It is. It's pure freedom and total connection to nature. You know, we've been to Salt Spring Island a couple of times throughout, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years. And there is this special energy about this place, and you feel it. Like the minute you step off that ferry, you're like, wow, like there is like this.
It's crazy. It brings a lot of like very artistic, eccentric, and gifted people, it seems. I mean, I think Rafi's there, right? Do you ever go see Rafi play at the market?
Yeah. I saw him in the grocery store parking lot the other day with my landmate and my daughter. And of course, we're listening to Rafi all the time now. And so we saw him, and I was like, Brianna, phone. He started dancing in the parking lot. It was great. He's awesome. And there's so many writers and artists here. I think we have the most writers here than in all of Canada.
Wow.
I read that somewhere. So it is just a very creative place. It's really special.
Why do you think that is? What do you think draws people like that to the island?
Well, I mean, there's theory. I've heard that, Salt Spring is on a bed of quartz, a bed of rose quartz.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
Also, I mean, I do just know that when we get into more rural communities, there's a little more spaciousness for creativity. You see this anywhere you go. And so I find that when we are out of the city, there's not as much distraction and noise, that people can actually tune into what they really want to do. And then that's where you get art.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's probably what we feel when we step on there. We actually almost moved to Salt Spring Island, and it was like a little bit of challenge for us with a big decision, because I think the energy and all of this that you're saying was so attractive. But for us personally, because our life is a little bit all over the place, so we travel a lot, and being connected to the ferry, because that's how you have to get in and off the island, was just not suitable for our life in that moment.
Yeah, like if a camera breaks for us, it's like, oh no, it would be a massive undertaking to go and figure out how to get it fixed. And so like there's some things that keep us tied to like arm's reach of urban centers, if you could call Victoria that.
It is a sacrifice.
Right. Because for the most beautiful things, you have to give something up, I find, in life. And I think that's like, we saw this island and we've experienced it. And we went hiking there and we fell in love with it. And then we were looking for places we could go. And then we realized, like, what do we have to give up for that? And part of it was the ability to be nimble with what we do to provide our service. And so it was a little bit heartbreaking, but we just moved on the other side, just at the tip of...
We're still surrounded by trees, but maybe just in a slightly different way.
But it's funny, you said that thing about like the calling to nature, like if you died in the city. I think that's so profound, because, we went through a very similar thing in our partnership, where we met in a city. And the longer we stayed together and figured out who we were and started peeling things away, the more we realized we had to be in nature as much as possible. And so we would go there a lot with our dog, with Prince, but then slowly over time, we realized we needed to be there, when we'd travel with Boho, and then we'd come back to the city, we'd be like, oh, this is really heavy. Like, it was a really heavy thing on our soul.
Yeah, you start to feel the difference once you are able to remove yourself and immerse in nature, like how your body and your soul responds to it. It's really interesting. But what's also, I find that, I think as you continue to move through in different chapters of your life, especially, into parenthood and motherhood and bringing children into this world, and I find that personally in myself, like when we became parents, there's almost like a greater desire to be closer to nature and to, surround my child with the natural elements. So I'm curious, for you now that you're a new mom, how has that been, that experience of this new chapter of motherhood for you in this beautiful place?
Yeah, when I met Ben, I told him I don't want to live in the city. And I actually at that time had already been planning a move. And then, as life goes, we got deeper into relationship and we ended up staying and we lived in Vancouver. We lived near the ocean at the last part of our stay there, but still, it's not the same.
Right.
And I told him, I was like, I wouldn't have kids in the city. Like, it's just not for me. I won't do that. And I think it's because I've always been very connected to nature since I was little. It's always been my safe place. Ever since I could leave the house on my own, I would wake up in the morning and just go to the forest and be there all day. And I knew that in my heart, I wouldn't be able to mother the way that I wanted to mother living in the city because being there actually makes me physically sick. Like, I'm not being dramatic. I would actually have chronic pain, fatigue, exhaustion, overwhelm. Like, I couldn't thrive in the city. It's just so intense. I actually can't live in apartments because I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the EMF or the energetics, but I get extremely sick. And it's to the point where I was just completely down. And Ben was like, we've got to get out of here. And that's when we moved into a house, out of an apartment. And then I got a little bit better. And then eventually we moved out of the city entirely, completely into nature. And what do you know, like all of those symptoms just went away.
Wow.
I had more energy and my sleep was regular and I felt like a human again. And I think it was a few months ago, I was walking with him and I realized that I used to have chronic pain, like severe chronic pain. And part of it is that I did a lot of somatic work, but I also moved. And it was those two things that just wiped it off for me. And I feel like having kids in the city for me, what scared me about it was all of the iPads and the technology. And I know you can do that here too, but it's because there's less to do. People say, oh, there's nothing to do when you move out of the city, but I kind of see it in the opposite way. We're meant to be outside and in the dirt and in the trees. And so having a child grow up in that environment, remembering who they are and where they come from and learning natural skills and just learning how to listen to me is the most valuable thing that I could give my child. And so I'm just so excited every day. We wake up and we go outside and we say, good morning, sun, good morning, sky, thank you, birds. And we, acknowledge all of the beings and the elements. And it's just such a gift.
Oh my goodness.
So beautiful.
Every night we watch the sunset with Xavier and we say, bye bye, sun. And like he's been doing it for.
And he does a little wave, bye bye, sun.
But amen to everything you just said.
I think we connect on the same way in terms of, seeing that those first development years for a child to be immersed in those natural elements, because we are nature, right? Like that's where we come from. And so to be able to bring them.
But it's interesting. We recognize it, all three of us. And we, I know our stories and hearing yours, it's like we connect back to that which we had when we were children and see value and how that helped build us sort of a value structure in our lives. Because when I was a kid, it was like my BMX and ravines and forests and my cottage and everything was about connecting to nature. And the further I traveled from that in my life, the more I got sick too. And the more I didn't feel like myself and the more we came back to it, we realized, that's where we came from and it's where we belong and it's innately who we are. And so for Xavier, for him, for us, oh my God, like we hope that we're planting all the right seeds that even if he does what we did and end up in a city, he'll have that call back to the wild,
back to the earth,
back to who he is.
And I feel like that's what it's all about anyways, is just planting that seed and that initial imprint.
Yeah.
I have a friend, she's got 3 children. She had 2 boys and then 10 years later she had another child. And she's about 10 years older than me. So it's been special to have that, connection as I'm starting the journey.
Yeah.
And, she was telling me how her teenagers are like, these are like really healthy people, like really like rooted in the community as like teachers and guides. And she's like, yeah, and all of a sudden my kids are coming home with junk food and like we don't buy that stuff. So it's like
Wow.
it's not our influence. But she's like, that's just their own thing. Like they have to go out into the world and like do their own thing and
Right.
experiment for a while. And at the end of the day, when they come back home to themselves, maybe when they're in their 20s or 30s,
Mm-hmm.
they'll have that imprint. And that's really
Mhm.
what I think we can instill and
Mhm.
know that, whatever we give our kids in these early years, they'll remember on a cellular level, and
Mhm.
they're probably still going to go off and do all of the things that we're like, no, don't.
But they do have to
But
experience it for themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
To understand a little deeper of why, my parents didn't want me to do those things,
Yeah.
right? It's like they have to
totally.
get in trouble first to understand
Yeah.
the real reason, right?
To
Yeah.
fall to pick themselves back up.
Exactly.
But it's funny, like by us showing them a life without the things, an opportunity to live. Like, Xavier, he's 2 and 3 or 4 months right now, and we drop him off when we have things like this to do at a wild school.
They actually, here where we are in Costa Rica, they have this thing called wild school. So it's like a Waldorf mixed with just nature. And it's exactly why we wanted to even stay where we are right now longer, because of the school. Because you drop off these children and other parents drop them off too. And literally there's these yurts in the jungle, and their toys is everything that they create out of the earth. They're out of wood, out of rocks. They garden, like they teach them how to plant seeds in the earth. And it's so beautiful. Like, and they run around naked half the time. I mean, it's Costa Rica, so it's very open here in that way, but it's like they're truly like so in their element, and it's so beautiful to see children just thriving in that type of environment. And when I see that, it makes me happy that, we made those decisions right now in our life to allow him to have those, first experiences in daycare, as you call it, but it's
Yeah.
a special kind of daycare.
It's
But
they don't want it to be called a wild school, but I think they started calling it that, and then regulations said you're not allowed to call yourself a school, because then they have to like
Right.
pave the jungle and like have all kinds of
it's
infrastructure that
I
just
interesting.
see.
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
But it's funny because he comes home filthy, and every time like just covered in paint or mud or whatever, and I'm always just like my heart shines so bright when I'm like, oh, it's all
Yeah.
working out. Like, and again, like we show him the life now, and later in life,
Yeah.
hopefully when he gets iPads and technology and all the
Yeah,
things, he'll always have that thing to come back to, because he had that
exactly.
experience,
Yeah.
hopefully. But
Yeah.
we're figuring it out. Like we're
Yeah.
2 years in, and it's like
It's still always a
we
journey.
have no idea if the
Yeah.
decisions we're making, what outcome they'll have. But I mean, what about you and your partner? Like, what other things are you doing sort of outside
How are
of
you guys figuring it out
yeah,
right
the
now?
usual paradigm is so like, this is how you raise a
Yeah.
child. And like, I think it's so
Yeah.
exciting to talk to parents that are like, well, no, maybe there's a
This is a
different
different way.
way.
How old's your daughter, by the way?
She's only 6 months, so I'm
6
still in the
months.
honeymoon phase,
Mm.
so I obviously do have a lot of my own plans though, because I've been preparing for this for a long time.
Mm.
I'm a planner, and I started, researching pregnancy and birth and menstruation and parenting and all of these things when I was like 20 years old.
Oh,
And
wow.
so,
Okay.
then I also worked as a doula in birth work, tended a lot of births, and I really got myself ready,
Wow.
studied attachment. And obviously attachment is also the foundation of my work, like my
Mm-hmm.
career. Um, so I felt really ready on many levels. We waited a long time to
Mm.
do this. But for me, it's just been about connection and having secure attachment and just doing what feels right in my bones, and um, not really worrying about the rules.
Yeah.
And my husband and I are both naturally rule breakers. So uh, that just works well for us because we
Mm-hmm.
just do what feels right. Um, we co-sleep, and I exclusively breastfeed, and probably going to homeschool. We want to do a bit of an adaptive model though, like
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of other people in our community, and our ideal is to have a yurt on our land and, do school here. And then we also have a lot of really beautiful nature schools here. Like
Yeah.
there's
Amazing.
one here on Salt Spring that's like the Four Shields method. And then there's a branch of it in Cowichan as well.
Mm.
And actually, my friend and mother's helper, who she lives on the land to help me, she was a mentor in that school. And so I've learned so much from her.
Wow.
And what is that method? I'm so curious
The
to
Four
know.
Shields method, it's Indigenous informed. So it's really rooted in respect for all beings and connection to the earth. One of them is called Wisdom of the Earth. And they have just these beautiful programs where they teach songs and skill building and like tracking, and basket weaving, and they play all of these nature games with kids. And I don't know, she tells me all of these stories of what it's like for her, and I'm just really, really excited to get that experience for myself and to be able to bring my daughter as soon as she turns 3. But that's sort of the plan, is just to help her stay connected to her true self and to curate environments that enrich her life and help her discover more of her own truth. Because I find that, especially for kids, if we just put them into public school or regular style daycares, there's sort of just this huge mix of different belief systems and cultures, and there's not a lot of cohesiveness in terms of like communication and things like that.
Yeah.
And so my desire is to help her join different types of communities, but that have clear goals.
Yeah.
And then she can find her way in that sense, instead of just going into something that doesn't have like a clear mission.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like with the public school side of things, you work so hard with your child and then you drop them off somewhere and it's kind of like the kids are left to teach each other. So you end up having all of the kids.
Or other parents are
all of the other kids, what they've been taught by their parents are then thrown into a pile with your child, and the kids kind of like in their own kid democracy way figure out, what do we all think of all this? I think about when I went to public school and the things I learned from other kids, and all of a sudden I would go home and be like, Johnny gets to do this. I want to do that. It's like, whoa, like all of a sudden the entire thing that my parents structured me with is like put really into the the judicial system of each child. And it's like, to me, it's like, I like how you said that, like with different communities that have like clarity and understand like a cohesive
and
sort
a greater
of
mission as well.
yeah,
right?
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah. And especially I find that, in the general like society, there's all of these rules that they expect, new parents to follow. And I remember when Mark and I became parents, somebody gave us a book and it was called What to Expect When You're Expecting. And I opened the book and I was like, I'm going to throw this out. You know what I mean? Like I literally was like, I wanted to, because it was just like, what?
I think you actually said this
I
might
have
be
to
the
let
first.
my baby cry until it that's not self-soothing. That's trauma. You know what I mean? Like it's learning that no one's coming for help, like all of these things. And so I'm curious, I can tell that we're probably very aligned in those ways, but how are you guys approaching the idea of, these first developmental years in your child and certain techniques that you want to bring forth compared to what the society pushes on most parents?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first I will say that in the last 6 months, I've been made so aware of how privileged I am to even mother the way that I'm mothering, because it's just sort of broken my heart in a lot of ways. And it's opened my eyes too, because I think so many moms want to be able to show up in the ways that I'm allowed to show up, and so many other moms who have the privilege to are showing up, but there's so many constraints.
Yeah.
And so it's opened my eyes, and I'm like, wow, this is really not okay, that in order to give our children secure attachment, we have to have enough money, and we need to have community support and all of these things that so many people just don't have. And so it's really showed me how much work we have to do in terms of village building and community building. But for me, it's really been the first 3 years, it's about her. And especially the first year, it's just, everything is about her. Like I wiped everything off of my desk. I think this is like the first, maybe the second podcast I've done in the
Wow.
last 6 months. Like I've just
Wow.
kind of pushed everything
Mm.
down the road. And, you know, I've just focused on being with her, and we're exclusively breastfeeding and we're co-sleeping. She actually sleeps on me because she's a contact sleeper. So she
Yeah.
won't sleep even next to me, which has been
We
a challenge.
know that challenge.
Actually, Xavier exactly the same.
Still
Wow.
actually won't fall
Yeah.
asleep
So
without
many babies
contact.
are.
Yeah. Does that, you find it affects your sleep a lot right now?
I mean, at this point, I'm so adapted.
Mm.
Like I'm so used to it, and I love it. I'm so addicted to her. She's just the best.
Yeah.
Um, and it can be a challenge for sure,
Yeah.
you know, because when she um, wakes up 3 hours later than me, you know, I'm 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. and I'm just laying there staring at
I
my
know
family,
that.
sleeping for hours, having to pee, and I'm not moving. Um, and, you know, when she goes to bed earlier, I have to get into bed and
Right.
hold her.
Yeah.
But, you know, I just do. And then we fall asleep. I sing her to sleep. And then when she goes to sleep, often Ben will just like get into bed and we'll watch a show or something for an hour. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, he'll come hang out with me. um, but it's just been so special to have that time together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine personally having my baby in another room in a crib. I'm just like, what? I think because I'm so
Yeah.
used to having her with me now that I cannot imagine having her away from me. And also how difficult that would be, even
Yeah.
just to nurse in the night, because you know, she just basically sleeps with my boob in her mouth, so it's really easy for us. But I'm like, I can't imagine having to get up multiple times.
Yeah.
Well, that was a huge thing for us when everyone warned us, like, you're never going to sleep again. Like, there was a lot of fear mongering around our expecting Xavier as a first child, like parents that had a hard time
Yeah.
sort of like projecting their situation upon us and warning us, especially about
Yeah.
sleep. And then we co-sleep, and we did from the very,
Yeah.
like from the minute, like the night he was born, we were just all cuddled together, sleeping on a mattress on the
Yeah.
floor.
But I think the sleeping wasn't as bad as people were projecting, because of, I think, exactly what you're saying, is that when the baby, like Xavier, literally, he's like the same baby. Like he would literally put my boob in his mouth, and that was his soother. Like we don't even use like pacifiers or anything like that. Like he
Or
was just
bottles even.
he was attached to it. But because of that, it was, you know, it gave the mom, myself, and I can see for you as well, a moment to be able to at least relax as well. You're not having to get up and down and also disturb your sleep. Like if you get into that sleep pattern and then wake up, stand up out of bed, walk to the other room, you know what I mean? That you're already
And the
like
baby has to be
disturbing
loud
them.
enough to also come out of
Yeah.
of sleep mode. And so everyone's out of sleep mode. And then there's it's a fascinating thing.
It is, yeah.
Co-sleeping is something we're really astounded by, that it's like, it's not presented as like a viable option in a general narrative.
I mean, there's a lot of fear around it, especially in North America. I mean, we know like in other cultures
Yeah.
that it's normal.
Mm-hmm.
I've been shocked actually to see like how it's sort of like the vaccine debate in a way. Like people are like in camps and it's very
Yeah.
intense,
Very
and
divided, yeah.
so many moms are not even courageous enough to tell their pediatricians or, you know, their family members that they co-sleep. They lie and they set up a crib and they pretend their baby sleeps in a crib.
Wow.
Wow.
Which I was just like, wow, that's fascinating too, you know? But yeah, I don't know. It just feels pretty natural. And of course, there's risks if you're drinking or if you have bedding all over their face or if you have a super soft bed and they can sink in. Like there's ways to do this safely, of course. Um, you know, but also I'm just like, how weird is it that our baby, it's in our body for 9 months, this tiny little being, and then you give birth, and then the next day or that day, you just like put them away.
Yeah.
Like,
It's very
I
strange. Yeah.
don't get that. It
Yeah.
doesn't work for me. I can't.
No, and I connect on it in a very similar way. It's crazy. It was something that I was also really, really curious about, you know, when it comes to relationships with your husband, right? Having a child, it definitely, from, you know, personal experience, but also from hearing from other friends, like it always slightly shifts the dynamic of your relationship. How has been that experience for you guys in terms of your personal connection and relationship, well, as you brought another being into the world?
We are just so with her right now. I mean, honestly, our relationship is on pause in some ways. Like, we have a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't have like the same intimacy,
Yeah.
of
Mm-hmm.
course. Like,
Yeah.
we have a baby who's exclusively breastfeeding. There's not a lot of sex happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's no dates
Mm-hmm.
happening because we're not ready to be away from her. And even if we were, she's exclusively breastfeeding and I don't give her bottles. So unless I'm going to do that, can't be away from her.
Mm-hmm.
And so for us right now, it's like those little pockets.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have some friends and two women who live on our land who help us with Ray, and they know her really, really well. One of the ladies, she was at my birth. I've known her for years. She's just one of the most special humans I've ever known. And so fortunately they know Ray and well enough that, you know, they can put her in the carrier and go for a walk for half an hour, an
Mm-hmm.
hour. So Ben and I have had 1 hour date alone in the house so far,
Mm-hmm.
where we were alone and she was out in the woods with them. And it was wild. We were like, wow, this is, remember me?
What did you guys do for
um,
that 1 hour that you had to yourself?
we had sex.
Okay.
Yeah, and we just like cuddled naked and like just
Yeah.
we were just together, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
But
beautiful.
we right now are okay with the fact
Mm-hmm.
that our relationship is shifting,
Yeah.
and you know that like enjoyable party time where we got to just like go on travel adventures and you know hop in the car and go anywhere we want and all of those things. Like, we did all of that and now we're in a new phase and we're not worried
Yeah.
that right now we're
Mm-hmm.
not having hot sex or that we're not going on a lot of, you know, adult adventures because this is the phase that we're in.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's definitely, I think, been hard in terms of communication because I'm changing in terms of what I need as a mother,
Mm-hmm.
and what I expect from him is changing. And even the way that I'm showing him love has changed. And so we've had some challenges to face around that because now that we have another being in the house, it's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been navigating that in terms of love languages. Like, I'm really much more acts of service right now because I mean, that's what I need the
Yeah.
most.
Yes.
And so what I found is I was giving him a lot more acts of service, but I'm also more tired and more rushed. And so not giving him the same words of affirmation as much, or not being as, you know, not offering as much praise. And so that creates an impact. And so, you know, just noticing where little things have fallen to the wayside so that we can work on them, even though
Mm-hmm.
we don't have a lot of time, you know, to
Mm-hmm.
spend one-on-one time. I think even just knowing how we need to love each other in these moments
Mm-hmm.
and repairing when that's not happening and working on doing it better, that's been our mission so that we can, even if a part of the relationship is on pause for a while, you know, that connection and the communication and the love and the emotional intimacy is
Mm-hmm.
there.
That's beautiful. It's
Mm-hmm.
very
Wow.
conscious. Have you always had this level of self-awareness to your relationships with people in your life and with how you behave and how you treat others?
Oh gosh, no. No.
Where did
That's why I'm here. No, yeah. I have a really wild story. So I won't start from the beginning, but my childhood and my early years up until I was about 20, maybe even probably around 25, were just absolute chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So my relationship patterns were a complete disaster. So I really had to learn through a lot of trauma, a lot of pain, a lot of heartache, and be sort of kicked onto the path, through loss.
Yeah.
And that's what I did, and I went deep into the healing work. And from that point, then I met Ben, and we started doing this work together. And so we have been doing the work together since we met. Like through 3 months in, we were in tantra containers and doing conscious relationship trainings, and that's been our path. But previously, I was really very much still learning and still playing out very old wounds in my relationships that stemmed from my own childhood
Right.
pain.
I think that's so important for people to hear, because I think like those that share their experience and the wisdom that they now have come to, I think a lot of people just imagine that they were always that way, and they look at themselves and they think that it's like it's too far of a journey for themselves, or almost could not even be a possible journey to get to a level of consciously living with intention and with self-awareness, and to better their relationships with themselves first and others around them, to live a more holistic life. And I think it's really strong, and something everyone should take note of, that everyone starts at zero. We all go through chaos and figuring
to
it
a
out.
degree, of course.
Well, to a degree, exactly,
yeah.
to each at their own, but at the same time as that, like it's a journey, and I think you never get there, but it's the journey as you progress that brings the spoils which enrich the life.
But I also think, I've read about your longer version of your past, and I think everything that you've gone through is very inspiring in a way, because I think for a lot of people that perhaps may be in a toxic relationship right now, or in a place where they're not happy, to see others being able to break away from that and then do this hard self-work to come on the other side and live the work, just even to see how you speak about, even just the shift in your relationship, with Ben right now, and how you're so deeply aware of what's happening. A lot of people are not aware. They're like, I feel different, and they're just like, they're just reacting. And it's really inspiring for, I think, people seeing this, but also to know that there is a way out of toxic place. Like, you don't live there forever. And if you see others make their way out, it's almost like, well, let's see what you did, and how did you get yourself out into this beautiful place right now that you're in a healthy, conscious relationship.
And the work that you do, I think it speaks to the work, obviously, that you've done, I imagine. We were looking at some of the relationship archetypes that you speak to, and I think those are really fascinating and incredible ways that people can consider each of those archetypes and how they might live inside parts of them, or whole inside themselves, and then how to maybe process through it to become more pure in the way that they interact. But can you talk a little bit about those archetypes for everybody, and for us too, because I think it's fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, the foundation is really that, what we go through in our earlier lives, in our childhood, our teen years, and even our early 20s, that shapes us. Of course, it really does start in the family system. For me, it was foster care and addiction and a lot of abuse. And not my mother wasn't physically abusive to me, but I experienced abuse in other containers when I was, living in all sorts of different homes, and also witnessing a lot of abuse. And that led to addiction and all the things. And so for me, my template, my imprint was chaos and trauma and pain and disconnection. I didn't have a healthy template. And so I also grew up in pretty rough areas with, nothing. We didn't have money. Like, I couldn't eat sometimes. And so when I started getting into relationships, I carried that survivor archetype with me, that had to wear a mask in my childhood in order to survive.
Right.
As I was hanging out with people who were 5, 10 years older than me, who were in and out of jail, it wasn't exactly safe to be vulnerable or to show that I had been hurt. So I was very like tough exterior, which is hilarious because I'm so tiny. Like, I'm like 4'9". I'm like this really, really tiny human, which almost made me try to get even bigger, because I was so small and vulnerable. And so I just had this crazy survivor mask going on where I was really guarded and defended, and nobody could get through. I remember when I was about 13 or 14 in this foster home with this foster mom, and we really got close really fast. She had rescued me essentially, like she had come and I was an emergency placement in the middle of the night into her home. And we just bonded so deeply. And I really did love her. And I remember the first night she said, "I love you." And I froze my whole body. I went into complete freeze and I couldn't speak. I couldn't say it back. And I wanted so badly to say it back. But I couldn't, my whole nervous system just shut down. And I remember that so distinctly because that nervous system pattern is what I carried with me. Like, I was about 13, 14 at that time, and that's how I was until I was, like, 20.
Wow.
Like, I could barely speak my feelings at all. And then, I went into this other relationship that sort of illuminated it all and crashed and burned, and that's when I got onto the path. But that survivor archetype is one that a lot of us can relate to, which is, I've got it all together myself. I don't need anybody.
Yeah.
I can take care of everything myself. I don't need to ask for help. And I'm fine. I don't have, I don't have any pain. That didn't bother me. I'm okay. And so I think a lot of us have to look at that mask that we're wearing that says, I've got it all together and I don't have anything to look at. And really look at what's underneath the surface, which is a lot of tenderness and innocence and all of that love and vulnerability that we had to protect long ago. And that's one of the main archetypes that I see in my work too, and a lot of people that come through my doors. And then the other is, one of them is the love chaser, which is, I am anxious because love was hot and cold in my reality. And now what I know is pursuing. And it's coming from this really out of body place where we are so desperate to be seen and loved and recognized that when we find somebody who's pulling love away or withdrawing or not meeting us or not giving us what we want, we take it as a challenge and then begin to pursue. Right? And that's another really common hot and cold, anxious, avoidant dance that I work with a lot in my work. I have a whole program around, relationship anxiety, because I find that for those of us who have any form of, childhood trauma or abandonment wounding or a trust wound, mother wounding, father wounding, somehow we're going to wear these masks in our relationships, depends on what our conditioning is. And it prevents us from just really being who we are and being authentic, but also just letting people see us and love us. It's funny because we do these things so that we can get love, but it's actually the very thing that prevents us from having love that's authentic.
Right.
And that's because you're putting forward a false identity that isn't authentic to yourself. So that anything you receive is a reflection of that.
When you're in a frozen state, or when you're in a defensive state, or when you're, guarded, or you're overgiving or people pleasing, or you're pretending to be okay when you're not okay, you aren't in your center. So what you're saying yes to or no to, it's all over the place. And the kinds of people that are in your energetic field, who knows, they might just be there because you're giving them what they want, and there's no reciprocity because they've learned that they can just take from you. There's all sorts of dynamics that happen when we're not being true to ourselves. We're not being authentic. There's also so much resentment that builds. So we can be the kind of person who is really loving and giving all of the time, but actually we're full of resentment and anger towards this person because they're not meeting our needs, yet we've never spoken them.
Wow.
And so we're building relationships based upon inauthenticity. And so what happens is, when we decide to step into ourselves and be true to our essence, a lot of those relationships will naturally end because the deal is over. right? There's some imbalance going on. And so in order to have authentic, healthy relationships, we have to be ourselves. We have to honor who we are and what we want, and be willing for people to say, well, actually, that doesn't work for me. I don't want that thing. But that's the exact thing that we have to practice doing. It's qualifying. So we're carefully curating and consciously choosing who we want to be in relationship with, rather than falling into relationship from our wound.
No, that really resonates a lot. And, you know, I'm interested though, when you speak about that, I wonder if a lot of people are choosing, you know, these type of attachment styles, right, to like different relationships that they encounter. And it's almost all out of fear, because I find, you know, in the society, there's this stigma that, oh, well, you should be in a relationship, or oh, why don't you have a partner? You know what I mean? Like there's like, so it's almost like how do I put this in words? They stay in these relationships, in these toxic environments, untrue and unauthentic to themselves, out of almost fear. If I show my true colors, then this will not resonate anymore. This relationship will be severed, and then I'll be alone. And then they're scared, right?
Well, I think it expands beyond like intimate and romantic relationships, and it goes to friendships too.
Yeah.
Like to not be yourself in friend circles because you have these people in your life, and you think, you know, quietly, if you are conscious of or if it's in the unconscious, it's like, if I show them who I am and that is not accepted by the group, being alone is the scariest outcome. And when in truth, like to me myself, like being alone has been learning to be okay with being alone has been the strongest and most arduous at sometimes when it first began for me, but like lessons that I learned anything from. Because you get rid of the people that are holding in a place of inauthenticity, and you can find the space to actually figure out who you are.
Yeah. And in the work that you do, like how do you help people get through this? You know what I mean? Like they come into this awareness that I'm in a toxic relationship. I am, you know, in a really like anxious or avoidant anxious style of relationship. What is the first step for people to begin to transform and transition out of that toxicity?
Well, it's different for everybody, because, you know, sometimes the relationship is really deep and you're in this very committed relationship where you have to really spend some time soul searching. Not everybody can just, you know, get up and end the relationship. Sometimes it's just the anxious avoidant dance where they're dating, or they're, you know, continuously attracting the same kind of person over and over. And so always I say that one thing that you can do right now is get closer to yourself and your truth, right? And get more in touch with your own body,
right?
So that you can trust yourself again. And that takes work.
Yes.
You know, because a lot of us we're coming from fear responses. And so in my program, I just created one called Freedom from Relationship Anxiety. And it's all about the somatic process of returning to our bodies and healing our nervous systems, so that we can actually listen again to the messages that our bodies are sending us, instead of responding to alerts of fear or anxiety. And, you know, that's a piece I think a lot of us miss, is we do the mindset work, but we don't do the work in the body. And so the mind is growing and learning, and we're becoming more aware, but we can't figure out why these patterns are still repeating in our bodies, and why we just continue to repeat the same cycle and over again. It's because that's the nervous system pattern. And so we have to slowly learn how to self-soothe, be okay taking care of ourselves when we're feeling triggered or activated or scared to be alone, so that we can nurture ourselves enough to a place of confidence where we can see things clearly, and then we can take the steps to, you know, change the relationship, repair the relationship, end the relationship, whatever is needed. And we can't really make those decisions from a place of internal chaos, or if we do, we will likely just end up right back where we started with someone else.
Right.
That's really nicely said. Wow. And so this, you know, this course that you offer, where can people find it,
All
and
of
how?
the courses.
Or, I mean, yes, and of course your wonderful book as well, Becoming the One. But you know, I think this conversation, I'm sure, can connect to a lot of people listening to it, and if they wanted to go deeper into this work, how can they do that with you?
So my programs are at risingwoman.com/programs. And my book is available on Amazon and all of the major bookstores, and being published in so many languages right now, which
Oh,
is really
amazing.
exciting.
Wow.
Yeah,
Amazing.
I'm excited. It's even going to be in Chinese and Korean. And I was
Wow.
like,
Okay.
wow, I wonder
Amazing.
how my work is going to fit into all of these different cultures.
Right.
Like every
Yeah.
country has its own culture. So I'm just so curious to see like how people respond there. But yeah, that's where you can find me. And then my personal website is SheleanaAiyana.com. And I do writing on Instagram, of course, and there's a
Yes.
YouTube channel as well.
And how do you
Yeah.
balance all of this? Because there's a lot, it seems, going on of like you're sharing so much of yourself. And how do you balance it with your own self-care? Like what do you do to take care of yourself rather than just offering and working towards
Yeah.
the goal and the mission?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm fortunate that I have a really amazing team. So I don't actually work a lot, especially now that I have a daughter, probably work 4 hours a week max. And self-care right now, really, honestly, it looks like just having a nice shower or like a 15-minute bath. There's not a lot of time. Uh, but another thing is that when my daughter naps, because she's a contact napper, I always have two options. Do I want to go and nap with her in our bed, or do I want to put her in the carrier and go for a hike in the forest in my backyard? And so I get out in the forest for many, many, many hours per week, every single week. And that's my healing place. So, I don't get alone time per se, but I get the best time with my daughter, just connected and in the trees. And that's my special time to really just be in nature and heal.
That's beautiful.
That's so amazing.
What about supplements? Do you take supplements at all?
Yeah, I do. I take like a prenatal vitamin, and I take fish oil, probiotic, and I take like right now I'm taking a plant-based iron. I was trying to do raw liver smoothies. Oh, it was killing me. So I take desiccated liver or a plant-based iron. Yeah. And I also take a lot of collagen in my tea. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. But I'm pretty flexible, like I like to work with herbs and homeopathics a lot, but I try to just change things based on where I'm at and what I'm feeling. I don't like have like a set
I like that.
regimen.
Very intuitive. I feel like that's how
Yeah.
it should be, right? Because our bodies are constantly
for
shifting
sure.
and needing new things.
If there was one piece of advice that you could give yourself, like let's say 15 years ago, sitting where you are now, and you could whisper in your ear back then, do you know what that would be?
15 years ago, I'm trying to think where I was when I was 15 years ago. So I was like 20 years old. Yeah. Yeah, I think it would have been let yourself be young. Let yourself be young.
Oh.
I was really chasing, at that time, I was chasing success, trying to be successful and trying to have it all together, and really everything was in chaos. So I didn't let myself play or really have any fun at that time. I think that would have been really good for me.
That's beautiful.
I'm doing it now.
Good.
That's beautiful.
Well, amazing, Sheleana. I say your name right? Sheleana? Sheleana.
Yeah.
Okay. I was hoping that. It's a beautiful spelling, by the way. I love the way your name's spelled.
I get all sorts of weird pronunciations. I get Sheleana, Shaylana, Lena. When someone says my name right, I'm like, wow.
But I know we're coming into the time that your baby, needs you, and I appreciate, just being able to connect with you today. And, I hope that maybe we can connect in person at some point if we ever make our way to Salt Spring Island. It would be great
give us a call. We're here
to come and explore and experience your beautiful woods and your trees that you talk about.
Walk in the woods together. That would be so special for sure.
Yeah. But amazing. And we'll definitely link, everything in the show notes for people to be able to go and check out your website, your Instagram, your wonderful book, all of these amazing things and offerings that you bring to the world. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so
thanks for
much.
this, guys.
All right.
Amazing.